I started leading on AoC's work, but working very closely with Richard Caulfield, who some of you might have heard of, who is the area director for AoC in the Northwest, who's got a particular interest in this area. So we've been working together both at the policy level and with Richard looking at the actual implementation of policies, how far they work, how far they don't, specifically in the Northwest. Okay, so what have we done so far? We've carried out 2 mental health surveys in 2014 and the end of 2016. And it gives us an evidence base. They show what we knew already, that there is a huge increase in the number of students actually declaring a mental health difficulty. 85% of the colleges, and it was well responded to our surveys, that experienced an increase in numbers of students. Also, a very large number said they felt that there were a very large number of students who they felt had a mental health difficulty but hadn't declared it. And what we've been doing is working at a policy level, particularly recognising the need to engage with a whole range of other agencies. Specifically, I've been working with DFE, with NHS, with Public Health England, and more recently with universities. To 2016 to 2017, the year for promoting good mental health in colleges. So mental health was very widely put forward at our annual conference, and there were quite a lot of initiatives that happened, including the development of the resources pack, which Ian will be talking about later. The key challenges which we found facing, which I'm sure will be familiar to all of you working in colleges, often there was a lack of staff awareness of the issue. Staff were very concerned, they wanted to help. And I think along with that, there was also a side effect of there being far more awareness of mental health, where people were getting concerned if a student came and said, I'm feeling depressed, should they refer them on or not? There was a lack of information from schools. Often students would come along, and even if they had been having support for mental health difficulty at school, they didn't come with that information. There was often this feeling, oh, well, it's a fresh start, let's keep that hidden. And also we found a lot of young people actually were first identifying in college. There were, as we all know, considerable reductions in budgets. The money which should support this, which is in the disadvantaged fund, is being stretched for more and more areas of work. So there was a difficulty in actually finding resources for this work, and also a decline in other services such as the youth service. So more and more issues were actually being raised in college. And we found there was a very high proportion of when a college did feel they needed to refer a student for external support, often this was rejected. And the figures we've got was over 30% of requests for CAM support were rejected. And particularly the issue of CAMs in most areas stopping at 18. There was this fact that a lot of college students actually go between 18 and 19. And also we had very many examples of people who would refer a student to CAMs if they were 16 or 17, were told, oh, well, they're so nearly into adult services. Actually, there is no point in us taking them on now. So there was a real difficulty in managing to get referrals to CAMs. And generally, a lack of engagement with colleges by the external mental health system. Sometimes actually a lack of engagement, but often just not knowing about further education. And it was interesting when Richard did specific work in the Northwest, getting groups of college principals to work with their local CCGs and CAMs. Often they would say, gosh, yes, we really need to be working with you, but it's all part of this fact that FE is still a very hidden sector. And that certainly external mental health services were not aware that 2/3 of all 16 to 18-year-olds who are in education are in colleges and not in schools. And that's one thing we've really been trying to raise awareness of. We realised also, and colleges who were working in this realised actually, if you're going to support students' mental health issues, you've got to have mentally healthy staff. And a lot of colleges, and I'll be giving some examples of this later, have recognised the need to actually look at the well-being of their staff as well as the well-being of their students. And the final thing, which in a way ties in with what I've said already, a lack of coordinated resources. And one of our big policy asks, which I'll be talking about later, is that money can go further if it's joined up. And what we need is more integrated work between health and education. So, right. So just to say quickly some of the policy issues that are going on. As you know, there is a lot of awareness, there is a lot of national interest from the Prime Minister downwards about mental health, particularly young people's mental health. And by the end of this year, the government will be issuing a green paper on children and young people's mental health, which will be followed by a consultation. This was going to come out earlier, but it was delayed because of the election. But the news we're getting, or just yesterday I was talking to people about it, is that it's probably going to be out sooner rather than later. And the most recent dates we've been given is mid-November. So please, we'll be, for those of you who work in colleges, we'll be mentioning it in our Chief Exec's letter, but do look out for that and do respond to it. The key issues we've been told by the DFE, and we have already given evidence much earlier on to this paper, it's likely to include how to upskill up all staff in supporting the well-being of young people, as leading to greater prevention of mental health issues, and identifying how young people could better access support. We have already contributed to this paper, both Ian and I together and separately. And recently I've been working with Universities UK because they are particularly concerned that students should be mentioned in this, that it shouldn't stop at 18. And we find we have a stronger lobbying if we're working with them. And the sort of issues that we both, Universities UK and us, are putting forward, and that I think will be going into the Green Paper from what I've heard, is something about an extension to 25. We are saying very strongly we want CAMS extended to 25 to get over this real split of 18. That there should be far more focus on integrated services, not just saying this is a good thing, but actually showing how agencies can work together. That there should be more emphasis on transition, both transition from school to college and from college onto higher education or wherever else people go on to. I think some of these issues are going to be raised in the Green Paper. So really what we want you to do is look for the Green Paper and respond to it. How we have been working, sorry, the slides keep jumping around, that's why I was hesitating. For the last 3 years, AoC has been running a mental health policy group. And while having a lot of providers on it, at the last meeting about 15 colleges were represented, we also have representatives from NHS, from Public Health England, from the DFE, from the NUS. And this has been a very useful forum in actually sharing ideas and at a policy level getting people to understand where each other are coming from and the possibility of working more closely together. Its current chair is Stuart Rimmer, who is principal of the College of the East Coast. And it has raised the profile of colleges with external issues. For example, just tomorrow, Richard, and I've done a paper with him, is presenting to the clinical network of CAMS staff. And they are like regional people who deal with CAMS. So that what will happen with all CAMS, we'll get more information about how FE works, about what is happening with mental health in further education, and how CAMS ought to be more proactively working with colleges. And the key asks, as I've said already, we are asking for the extension of CAMS to 25. This does already happen in certain areas because CAMS can decide to work in this way. It's happening in Liverpool, it's happening, I think, in Birmingham. But we are saying that this should be actually a statutory requirement. It should happen everywhere. That all school-based mental health initiatives should include colleges. Currently, there have been quite a few school-based initiatives, and we are now managing to get those colleges included in those. I just heard today of a DFE-funded initiative, which is run by the Anna Freud Centre, which is training people in peer support for children and young people's mental health in 5 key areas, which are Bradford, Derby, Hastings, Ipswich and Oldham. And they are saying, and I'm talking to them this afternoon about this, they want a college to be included in each of those teams of people who are being trained up. There is also an extension of a named person initiative, which is bringing together health and education. It has happened in quite a few areas and didn't include colleges, but now it's going to be including colleges in the 20 more areas. It's the CCGs who will actually invite people to be part of their team, but we have said to them that they should include a college in each of these 20 areas. And there's also a third DFE-funded scheme, which is looking at pupils in years 10 and 11, but we have agreed that colleges should be included, that colleges who have a high number of young people 14 to 16. And I'm going to the first meeting of the steering group of that, so as we learn how colleges might be involved in that, we can start sending out information. And we're also asking, for a designated budget for FE, which actually is an ask that the Labour Party have just put out. So we're in line with them because we feel it's very hard for colleges to do this on the resources they currently have.
Thank you, Liz. And Liz continues to do a fantastic job for the AoC and colleges in keeping us on the radar of those people in the Department of Health and Education who sometimes forget about colleges, but Liz absolutely does a great job in reminding them that we're here and that we need support. And it's really good to see, even in the couple of months since I finished my term as president, that things are moving forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our resources before Liz comes back and talks about some case studies. I mentioned in the introduction that one of the things that came out of the survey was that people found difficulty in identifying 2 things. One, what good practice looked like in mental health work in colleges, and secondly, what resources could they access that would be useful for colleges. So what we did was put together a resource pack which includes a self-assessment tool and a list of resources, and that list of resources is available online and is being updated all the time. But really important to say as a starting point that our approach to our work on mental health is a holistic one. In other words, we take as our starting point that we need to work on well-being of all students. So our starting point is keeping all students well and making sure that every single student, and indeed every member of staff, can benefit from undertaking activities, having knowledge and skills that will enable them to be resilient, that will keep them well. And that's really important because mental health issues affect still a minority of students, a growing minority, but we in colleges need to support everybody to be fit and well. On the self-assessment side, we worked with one of the stakeholders in Liz's group, Public Health England, who developed a standard for what good practice looked like in mental health work in schools. And a charity that we work closely with, the Charlie Waller Educational Trust, provided teaching materials and some advice on the self-assessment questionnaire. And we've developed the tool and added some additional things, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in terms of approach, what we recommend is that people use the tool with a cross-college team led by a senior manager to work through the tool. I think even if you've begun your journey in this area and you've already got work underway, it's still worth having such a group take a look at this tool. I was in Leicester College last week. They brought together a group of 20 people from curriculum, from HR, from student services, right across the college, to look at how they could work together. And I think that's really the best way to do it. And as you'll see, when you look at the resource, there are some prompt questions. There's an ability to include in the questionnaire your response, rate yourself, include examples of where you're doing well, perhaps identify where you could do with improving your practice. And then you can link straight across to the resource section and the case studies, which will provide you with examples of material and resources that can help you to tackle those weaker areas. So our approach is the one that colleges are familiar with: develop a self-assessment, identify your strengths and areas for development, and then put together an action plan which builds on your strengths and addresses the areas for development. This is the framework which came from the Public Health England model. Like most things in education, it starts with good leadership and management, leadership from the top, and distributed leadership across the college. And then we have both in the self-assessment questionnaire and in the resource pack, things looking at ethos, curriculum, student voice and student involvement, staff development and support, targeted support, particularly for those with mental health issues, links to parents and carers, external partnerships, and then to close the loop, audit, monitoring, looking at how well we're doing. The one thing that's new in this model compared to the example that was developed for schools is external partnerships. And I think that's really important. As we'll say later on, colleges can't tackle these issues on their own. We need the support of good external partnerships. So part of the evaluation is looking at how strong your links with partners are and how you could develop them. One of the things that we used and came across in our development was something called the Thrive model. The Anna Freud Centre, who developed this, has already been mentioned by Liz. They're really the leading practitioners in the country on young people's mental health. And we think it's a useful model because what it does is identify the fact that there are different groups of support needed. So it's very much a needs-based approach rather than a diagnostic approach. So you can see the model here. On the left, what you've got are the sorts of services that you need to put in place, and on the right, a bit of shorthand for the 4 stages of support that are required. So essentially, in order to thrive, we've got prevention and promotion work, the wellbeing work that's being done with every student in the middle. Once you move beyond that, you have people who need support and advice. So this is an initial stage once you move from thriving into people wanting specific support on mental health. And that can be very much about helping them to self-support by just getting signposting to the right advice services. Beyond that and moving round the circle, we move on to getting help. This is for those students who need some additional support. So they perhaps need some outcome-focused intervention, working with them, helping them to set goals for self-improvement. And then moving around the circle, you're getting to the stages where you need more intervention, and that might be from specialist services within the college, or bringing external partners into college, or referring outwards. You're beginning to get to the point of CAMS there. And then getting risk support is very much for those at the extreme end who might be at risk, for example, of suicide, where you need some specific assistance and support. So those stages we think are useful, looking at those 5 groups in the centre, everybody needing prevention and promotion through the different kinds of intervention and support. So as you're thinking about the kind of support you need, you can look at each of these quadrants and think about how you would be helping students. So for example, on risk support, there's obviously a very close link up there with your procedures around safeguarding and child protection, what you would do if there were a serious incident. So let's go back to Liz and just talk about some examples of what good practice can look like, both in terms of the external partnerships and some other case studies.
Right, well, as we were saying, we feel external partnerships is key. And there are a range of organisations that colleges can, and a lot of them are already working with. There's CAMS, and which, as we said, there is the issue about age. They work from 0 to 18, although in some areas they do go up to 25. The adult social services for those aged 19 plus. Local CCGs, who are the responsible for buying local services. And a good way in, we have found, is every CCG should have written a transformation plan for mental health. And these plans have to be revised annually. And what we've got a lot of principals to do is ask their CCG, are colleges mentioned in your transformation plan? And the majority of cases they are not. So that often is a way in, or they should be. Local health and wellbeing boards, which is the leadership for to improve local health services. Acute mental health trusts, the clinical service for adults with more severe issues. And of course, GPs and the voluntary sector, such as local groups of mind. We find a lot of colleges are working with some of these, but not always working with all. Historical patterns have just grown up. And what we found with our survey was that while 54% of colleges reported working well with CAMS and 41% of them had joint provision, 48% reported a non-existent relationship with CCGs, and only 20% said they were involved with their transformation plans. So there is a long way to go before we get this really joined up work happening. Right, that's what I've just said. I was really going to put it on 2 slides. So, some case studies. There are several case studies on the resources which Ian talked about, so do look at those as well. The College of the East Coast, and it's Stuart Rimmer, who is the principal here, who is chairing our AoC mental health group. We like using this as an example because it's a very positive example of looking at well-being right across the college. I mean, Stuart often doesn't use the word mental health. He talks about well-being. And what he did was worked in conjunction with the voluntary organisation Action for Happiness, and actually recreated a lot of their materials to create a whole cross-college strategy for well-being. And very quickly realised that, as I said earlier, this couldn't include students without also including staff. So just a few pointers, and there is this case study written up in our resources, so you can see it in more detail. But all staff, as well as all students, have a wellbeing target. And the staff's target might be something like, I'm going to leave in time at least twice a week to pick up my kids on time. I'm going to go to the gym once a week. And these targets are monitored in the staff appraisal every bit as seriously as any academic targets they might have, and the same with the students' ones. Every student who comes to the college starts off by having a wellbeing strengths assessment. What Stuart says is an awful lot of young people come onto FE already feeling a bit of a failure. They haven't always gone on to A levels like their peers. And it's actually working out where their strengths are, what they're good at, how you can build on that. He links into a wide range of enrichment activities, including volunteering, a lot of emphasis of working with the sports department, and an opportunity for all students to participate in a mindfulness program. And also a very strong focus, which is also monitored, on student friendship and peer support. And it's very encouraging, it's very exciting to hear Stuart talk about that program, and I think it's a really good model. And of course, other colleges are doing it too. A few other very brief case studies. Highbury College in Portsmouth has for a long time worked with a recovery college, an MHS recovery college near them. And now has secured a place on the CCG board, and other colleges actually have also done this, and this actually makes the joined up work much better. Birmingham colleges have been lobbying together to encourage CCGs to commission for 16 to 25-year-olds, thus getting over that real block of 18. Hackney, where Ian used to be principal, and could probably talk about more than me, but has a very long-standing provision, often with adults, but young adults, posts funded jointly between Public Health England and the college and the Mental Health Acute Trust. And actually there is a post for somebody which has been going for some years, who actually goes into acute wards, often locked wards, works with people on them who it's felt they can benefit from education, and gradually facilitates that transition into college. And we've had students talk at some of our conferences from that programme, and it's really inspiring for them, saying really college has saved their life in many ways. There's several colleges, and this is particularly in the Northwest, and it does show the importance of having somewhere like Richard. I wish every region had a Richard. He's really pushed for principals to work with their CCGs, and the result has been that I think about 30 colleges in the Northwest and some colleges elsewhere have managed to get free mental health training. It's not a right, it's not going to happen automatically, but quite often when the CCG becomes aware of the college, they say, oh, we're doing some training for our staff. If your staff would like to come along, they could. One particularly very positive thing, Hugh Baird College, working with Merseyside Trust, Health Trust, is actually going to be getting 4 million for a building which will be sited within the college, but will include a Life Rooms mental health centre. Partly this will work with young people and adults with quite acute mental health needs, like a recovery college, to actually bring them gradually into education, but also will carry out a load of training for mental health staff at all levels. So that's going to be starting imminently. One I've just heard about, Exeter College has started approaching their CAMs, and now they've got a pilot research project with the college, CAMS and Exeter University, which will provide the college with additional support for young people with emerging mental health difficulties. And those are just a few of the examples that can happen. We can't say they will happen in any area. I think what we're saying is when you start making these links, then often there are pockets of funding around, things that you can buy into, or not buy into, but be bought into.
And one of the things we're doing as part of the online resources is adding to these case studies all the time. So if you think you've got examples of good practice that you'd be willing to share with colleagues in other colleges, then please do get in touch with Liz, and we'd be pleased to share those more broadly, because this is an area where we know we can learn from each other.
The questions that we have is for you, Liz, and that is about the mental health needs of learners with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. What are colleges doing about that? Do you think that colleges really recognise that learners with SEND may have mental health needs? And also, is this another case of silos, and are we failing to recognise the intersectionality of mental health and well-being?
Yeah, I think it's an important question, and I think in some ways we are failing. It's something I've been talking about a lot with NATSPEC, National Association for Specialist Colleges, and the Special Education Consortium. And I think it is an area we ought to be moving on to. What is happening at the moment, I think usually those students who maybe have a learning difficulty and are within discrete provision, usually their mental health needs are dealt with by the staff within that section. With those who are in mainstream provision, maybe with autism, then they would have access to whatever support there was for mental health across the college. But I think the question is absolutely right, saying that far too often mental health needs aren't recognised because it's, oh, you know, they're assumed, oh, it's part of their learning difficulty or part of their autism. And of course, the opposite is true, that often a lack of understanding about the particular needs of a student, say a student with autism, will then lead to a mental health difficulty. So I think a lot more work needs to be done, and there are, and probably I would put more on the resources list. There is work beginning to happen about how one supports the mental health needs, for example, of students who can't access talking therapies because they don't have speech. But I think it is something that we need to look at in a lot more detail, and that's what the AoC are aware that that's an issue they need to work on together. Just one more thing for the questioner is I think this is an area that could very well be raised in a response to the Green Paper.
Great, thank you. We do have quite a few questions now. So relating to the Public Health England questionnaires and resources that you've mentioned there, how you've adapted those. This is about how are you finding governors' involvement with those?
I've certainly found quite a lot of positive responses from governors as I've gone around and publicised the work that we were doing last year. One of the things that is in the self-assessment questionnaire is just a prompt to ask whether this is an area where you would like to involve a governor. In my own college, like many colleges, we had lead governors for different aspects of our work. And we certainly in Hackney had a governor who led on our work around mental health. And there are a couple of areas where it can link up. It could be with student services, it could be with the person who is looking after your safeguarding, perhaps leading on wellbeing more generally, so that it includes both mental health and it includes safeguarding, and those two things can fit well together. But I definitely think it's an area that at least needs reporting through to governors. So part of the action plan could be around doing some regular reporting. First of all, to make governors aware of the scale of the issues which your college is addressing. Secondly, then to share with them the action plan that you're developing. And thirdly, as part of the monitoring cycle, to keep governors informed about the progress that you're making, and perhaps an area where they can also help from their external resources. A number of colleges I know have governors who have come from health backgrounds, might be involved in the health system itself. So they can be useful allies in creating the networks with those external partners. Great.
Thank you very much for that. Tracy, I know you've got a question, and I'll unmute you so that you can put yours forward through your audio.
Okay, thank you. It was just really, because not all of us at the webinar are sort of 16 to 18 colleges. Some of us are sort of further education and adult learning and that sort of thing. So how can we access, you mentioned the tool that you use that helps sort of support your children. How is it that, is there any opportunity for us to have a look at it, or maybe so we can perhaps adapt it to fit our needs, rather, you know, because just because you're sort of saying you want to take it to 25 to support learners, but actually we have learners up to the age of 90, and that doesn't mean that they're any less sort of likely to have mental health issues. In fact, sometimes just as much, because they have life issues that they have to deal with. And it'd just be nice to sort of see how you've been supporting them, and if any of that can mesh into perhaps what we do.
Sure. I mean, certainly we aren't excluding adults, and nearly all further education colleges will have a very wide age range. The reason we've been focusing on the 16 to 25 is because the Green Paper is coming up, and we know there can be an impetus. But some of the good practice case studies I was talking about, like the Hugh Baird Recovery College, like what's happening at Hackney, are actually programs for adults. As far as the resources go, is your organisation a member of AoC?
So I would have to find out.
Because if they are, then you can access the resources through the website, through the AoC website.
And if we're not,
are not young people specific. They are for a whole college approach.
Yeah, if we're not a member of the Association of Colleges, though.
What's your organisation?
Luton Adult Learning. So I'd have to go back and check. I don't know.
I think it is.
Is it?
I'm pretty
if you get in touch with us afterwards, and we'll see what we can share.
We can do. But do check first if you are a member, because if you are, any members can access this. But if not, email us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Tracy. More questions, and I hope you are happy to continue for as long as it takes us to get through all of those. Ian and Liz, do let us know. From Patricia Dillon Russell, does the government have any focus on mental health for the over 25s? The Green Paper focuses on FE and young people at adult education.
Yeah.
Adult education is in neither category.
I mean, certainly at the moment, the government's focus has been much more strongly on young people. But they have actually made several pronouncements as well about concern about mental health throughout the population. I think where there are less links is the education link with the adults. And that's probably something we need to lobby them on more strongly. Although there have been, of course, the adult education initiatives, which Katina has been organising, which is a very large amount of money that has gone into adult and community education.
So the umbrella organisation HOLAX has been working particularly on that project, and perhaps we can just make sure that information about that is shared with participants as well.
Another question, and that is about, are colleges providing any engagement support for students' families to help them support their young people that you know about and can share with us?
Yeah, the issue of families with further education is always a sensitive one, isn't it? Because for some young people, it's really important to work with their families. With others, sometimes, you know, the families might be part of the issue and they very much want to be independent. So I think colleges themselves would very much let it be up to the young person how much they wanted to involve their family. Some of the materials that we have highlighted on our resources are actually ones, the Charlie Waller Trust, which we've put forward quite a lot of their papers, have got quite a lot of materials that are about involving the families as well as the young person, and messages for parents, etc., and parents dealing with self-harm.
No, I think have a look at the resources. There's certainly some good material there.
Right, okay, and question is about how are you differentiating your approach by groups of people who are most vulnerable to mental health problems, i.e. protected groups?
I'm not quite sure I understand that, but I think what we are saying is that following the Thrive model, we are looking at the different levels, creating wellbeing across the college, those who maybe need some support but not necessarily a mental health intervention, just somebody to talk to, into those who have more significant needs. But I'm not quite sure if the question's asking more than that.
Yeah, I think there is an overlap, and I'm thinking that the question's probably thinking particularly about responsibilities in relation to quality legislation for those with protected characteristics. And there, I think it's important in thinking about your equality strategy and action plan that you're looking at where there are crossovers here. There was a really interesting feature on the radio this morning, for example, about gender identity and the increasing emergence of young people with different gender identities and how those are managed. And not everybody who is looking at their gender identity will have mental health. As you be really careful about not jumping to assumptions here. But as with special educational needs and disability, there are some correlations, not least because of the economic challenges that there are. For example, we know that those from Black and minority ethnic community are much more likely to face poverty, to find it harder to find employment, not to do so well in education. And what the health world will tell you is that if you're unemployed, then you are more likely to have a mental health issue. So I think it's a case of looking at the crossovers, I think that was mentioned earlier on in relation to the SEND question, with people with other protected characteristics. And one of the things that I think is a useful resource is you'll find that your Health and Wellbeing Board will have a public health plan for the local area. And your public health plan, certainly my experience in Hackney, was there was a wealth of resources there about the mental health needs of the community and the incidence of mental health amongst those groups with protected characteristics. So I think it's about join up across the college and seeing links between the different work on mental health, your equality strategy, as well as other aspects of the work.
Yes, I mean, I'd agree with that. Certainly when we talk about creating a mental health strategy, although we're feeling colleges have found it useful to have a distinct wellbeing and mental health strategy, this is not going to be done in isolation. The whole fact it is a cross-college approach means it has to be seen in conjunction with other strategies and policies you have.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now over our time, and I hope that you are happy to pick another question. It is, I believe, to yourselves, but also colleagues who have joined us today, and that is about: has anyone got a wellbeing policy stroke strategy that they're willing to share, so that colleagues from Worcester County Council can use it to develop one for their service? They're working with adults 19 plus. And some of the work is with tutors who work remotely, so their own well-being is a priority, as they cannot easily offload with colleagues. Linked to that is also, how do they become a member of AoC?
Ian can answer the AoC one. As far as the strategies and sharing, in our most recent, this term, mental health group, we did ask members there who said they were developing strategies if they'd be happy to share them with the group. And we have 2 that are going to come to us by the end of term. They've just got to be ratified. One is from Exeter College, one is from Rees Heath. And certainly when I get those finalised strategies and share them with the group, I can ask those people if they're happy for them to be put up on our website. Okay, so I think we do have to look at, of course it has to come with the permission of the colleges, but look at ways that we've got good practice examples, but I think it would be good to start putting up. That's what AoC.
Yes, so AoC is a membership organisation, so and subscribe. Full members need to be incorporated colleges. Adult and community learning providers can become associates and get access to some of our resources. So just get in touch with us via the email addresses. Our email addresses can go up with the materials afterwards.
Great, thank you. One more?
We'll take one more. It'll have to be the final one. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Perhaps it is one that will help to wrap up this session, and it is great that you are staying with us for that bit longer. It is about, why are there separate resources for different types of providers, and how do these resources link to the resources that are on MHFE website? Shouldn't we have one place for evidence-based practice? And how do providers who are not AoC members access the resources? I think these have been answered.
It's a difficult one. I mean, why we developed it was because we work for AoC and we were getting a lot of requests from our members, and our membership does include 98%, I think, of general further education colleges. So we were responding, because our members are our client group, as it were, to their requests. And it's a very hard thing, I think, the sharing, because in a way, members do pay a membership fee. And if we start making everything open access, they might well say, well, you know, what's the point of me being a member? Yeah, how would you like to go on with that?
I think this is an area where clearly the primary concern is about people's well-being, whether they study in a college or in another bit of the education system. As Liz says, our members, pay a reasonably substantial fee for us to produce materials for them. However, we do work with the sister organisations that we have, including Sixth Form College Association, including HOLEX, and as has mentioned, Universities UK. So I don't think we would want to be protective of materials and resources. So I think if people can contact their own membership organisations, we are linking up with them, and I think that's probably the best way in which we can make things available. And I'm sure we have things to learn from other parts of the wider learning and skills sector. So sharing is in everybody's interest.
And I think there is a way when things are online, they become open access by default pretty quickly.
Thank you, colleagues. You've said that's all that you can answer for today, and that's plenty. And I believe it has been very useful for colleagues who have joined us. Someone's typing, so if they could possibly mute themselves, that would be great. Getting some comments for colleagues who have joined that was great, cool, and that they're looking forward to joining the next one. Just to say to everyone that Ian and Liz have made references to their colleague Richard Caulfield, who's doing a great work on mental health in colleges and well-being. He is delivering a webinar with us on the 26th, and there are colleagues from other sectors taking a different approach to working in this area. So do join us for as many as you can, and join me in thanking Ian and Liz. Thank you. I shall now close this webinar and look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.